Okay, our next speaker is the Vice President of the Filipino American National Historical Society, Georgia chapter, and she's going to talk about PINAY VISIONARIES, which is the theme of the National Historical Society. And I give to you Audrey Idaikkadar.
Mostly just pictures. I'm Audrey Idaikkadar, and I'm from the Filipino American National Historical Society. And so the video shared a little bit about the organization. So our mission is to promote enrichment through collecting, saving, sharing stories about Filipino American history. Oh, it's formatted oddly. That's okay. Let me see. Okay, as I figure that out. So FONS was established in 1982, and since then we've grown into 36 chapters throughout the country, and the one here in Georgia just started this year. And I'm going to talk about PINAY Visionaries, which is the FONS theme for Filipino American History Month this year. And so PINAY Visionaries is really talking about celebrating Filipino American women in American history and all that they have done. So there's a saying about how women hold up half of the sky, and I think that's very true. But I also feel like, you can stop and I'll try to advance. Okay, I can do it. So I also feel like it's actually probably more work than that, because they didn't only have to face the adversity of racism, but also the adversity of sexism. So there's so many women to think about or to share about that I had to narrow it down. Filipino American women have been leaders, laborers, activists, scholars, scientists. So many, they've done so many things. So let's see, let me go down. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what some women have done, since I have a very short amount of time. But also I want to say that I feel like there's so many other stories here about PINAY Visionaries, like Miss Venus Soriano, who shared earlier. That was so amazing to hear. So let's see. So this is Thelma Buchholz. She was the first Filipina American who was elected to the legislature in the United States. She was elected to the Alaskan legislature in 1972, and she served until 1984. So while she was serving, she was able to get money to do a study on the status of women in Alaska. In 1988, she went back to school after her youngest child went to college, and she went to law school. So in 1991, she became a lawyer and then joined the Alaska Bar. She also wrote this book up there, Filipinos in Alaska, from 1788 to 1958. So if you can imagine the first Filipino arriving in Alaska in 1788. So the book really talks about the contributions of Filipinos in Alaska and in the development of Alaska, including the mining and the whaling industry. So there is an example of a Filipino in Alaska. They're called Alascaros, and he's holding a sea eel. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little bit scary. Okay. So that is Vicky Manalo Draves. She was the first Asian American to win an Olympic gold medal. She actually won 2. So she had a Filipino father and an English mother, and she grew up in San Francisco in a time where it wasn't easy to be biracial, it wasn't easy not to be white. She wasn't allowed in the place where one of her coaches trained swimmers. She wasn't allowed in that swimming pool because of her race. She also sometimes had to perform under her mother's maiden name, Taylor, because it was more Anglo-sounding. Nevertheless, she went to the 1948 Olympics, and she won 2 gold medals. And there she is there, winning her medals. So there's lots of women in history, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about Filipino American women today. And so I think it's really great that I actually followed Omar and Josh, because it's about food. Let's see. So I feel like there's so many Filipino American women that are bringing Filipino food into the forefront of the American landscape, and I really think that they're heroines. I mean, this past year, Amy Bessa came down for the gala event, and that was amazing. And there's a lot of other Filipino-American women out there doing that. So for example, Nicole Panesca, she wrote the I Am Filipino cookbook. She also has 2 restaurants. And so she writes about how when she was a child, she felt ashamed of Filipino food. And I think that's something that I relate to as when I think back to when I was a child. And now she writes about how proud she is that her food is unapologetically Pinoy. And I love that. So there's also Angela de Mayuga, and she just shared her 10 essential Filipino food recipes in the New York Times this month. And so if you read the recipes, you can tell right away they're not traditional. And I think that's great because it shows the diversity. It shows the magic of food, that it changes, but it also shows the diversity of our community, and also how flexible and fluid we are depending on circumstance and space. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about people in Atlanta doing amazing things with food. So like Mia Orino from Kamayan, ATL, and they're on the cover of the Atlanta magazine. And so I have to say, the first time I went to a Kamayan event, I started crying because I was surrounded by Filipino people and non-Filipino people so excited to eat Filipino food. Just so excited. And I was like, what's happening? This is amazing. And then there's the food writer. Her name is Ligaya Michon. I don't know if you had a chance to read her yet. She writes about food, and she's a restaurant critic. And she's Filipino-American. She's actually written a lot about Filipino food and Filipino-American chefs, but she writes about lots of different types of food and restaurants. And what I love about her stories is that she really writes about the people who own the small businesses and prepare the food. And they actually end up becoming these beautiful stories about immigrants and also the diversity of food that is possible in places like New York, where she's writing, but also places like here in Georgia. And so last July, she wrote about Doreen Fernandez, who is a Philippine food writer who passed away 17 years ago. And she says the revolutionary thing that she did was to write about Filipino food like it's a cuisine. It is a cuisine, that it is worthy of notice and celebration. And I think that's what these Filipino women are doing. They are saying that Filipino food and our Filipino community is there, that we are worthy of notice and celebration. So I know that I don't actually know a lot about Filipino-American history here in Georgia, so that's why I loved being here today and hearing all the stories. One of the things we're doing in FONS this year is we are collecting StoryCorps stories. So I know that other organizations have done this in the past, and I'm super excited that we get to contribute further and add to like the StoryCorps set of Filipino-American stories in Georgia. So if you are interested, please connect with me. I'm Audrey, or you can email fonsga@gmail.com. And that's it. Thank you.